Kerrie Finch. Thank you so much for joining me and a huge welcome to Thrive Solo. I am very, very pleased to have you here. So thank you for joining me. Now, before we get into our conversation, can you just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Lucy, thank you for having me as a guest. I've listened to your podcast for ages, so I'm really delighted, and I can't wait to read your book as well.
Oh, thanks,
So
Kerrie.
congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Who am I? I am a Brit living in Amsterdam for the last 25 years. I went for a 3-month work contract 25 years ago, so something clicked. And nowadays I run my own company along with 2 partners who are based in the States, called Also Known As, and we have a reputation building company for creative businesses and brands.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for the introduction. Now, before we go more into that company, basically, I'd love to hear a bit about your life from when you kind of went to Manchester Uni
Yes.
and then you eventually ended up starting your own company, the Finch Factor. Tell us about that first and foremost. Like, what did you do at uni? How did you then get into this whole world? How did you then end up becoming an entrepreneur?
It's a twisty tale. I didn't study anything very specific at university, so I couldn't wait to run away and join the circus, as it were. You know, I come from a small town, Folkestone in Kent, and at the time I just wanted to, get out and experience the real world as I thought of it. And I went to London for a year and then went to Manchester University, and I just found my tribe. I felt really at home in Manchester and ended up staying for, I think it was 9 years in the end, because I worked there. My degree was English and American Studies, so it doesn't set you up for any kind of career. But I love the theatre, and it's always been my first passion. And one of my first part-time jobs was working in a theatre company as an usher, opening the doors when the actors needed to go through. So when the queues were on top of the door at the Royal Exchange Theatre. And then my first proper job was with the West Yorkshire Playhouse in the communications department. And that was where I had my, I think, like one of the best trainings ever. I worked with a woman called Kate Crow, who's now a BAFTA-winning producer. And we were in the PR department, basically, and she gave me such good training about, everything matters, and about speed, about accuracy, and about creativity, and how any role is creative as long as you add your special essence to it. So I learned a huge amount there. And from there, moved back to Manchester to work with theatre companies and arts festivals. And I worked with the BBC. And then the bubble was getting big, with what was called consumer tech, because tech was becoming sexier. And this would have been around 1997, 98. And I moved to London in order to join a PR company there. And moved through quite a number of different PR companies, and I just hated it. I found it really corporate. I found it really cold. I found the commute dreadful. No matter where I lived in London, I was always diametrically opposed from where I needed to go to work. And it just didn't do well for me, and I got sick. And then that was where I started getting quite, ill. I found earlier that in Manchester, they have a really boringly rare blood condition. So that's had an impact on my life with various, things. Anyway, so I left all those different jobs and went to freelance with a PR company in Amsterdam for 3 months. That was the project. And I thought, brilliant, I'll do this and get out of PR, because it's, I considered it, my London experience is what I thought the communications world was. And I went to Amsterdam and again found my tribe. I just loved the city. I loved being a foreigner. If you're a foreigner, you're never, you're always a second-class citizen, in one way or another, because you're not from that country. And my friends were from many, many different nationalities. And I, again, moved from one job to a next, ended up at an ad agency called Wider & Kennedy, which is hugely creative and global, and was their very first brand director, helping them raise the profile of the brand, and just loved it. And I found my niche, which was the communications with and positioning and brand building and comm strategy with the creative industry. So whether that's agencies or production companies or design bureaus, but also, those brands that are needing to work with them. So I worked there for a while. This is a very long story, Lucy.
No, keep going, keep going.
So I worked there for a while, and then I wanted to, break free and become an entrepreneur, basically. And I'd always left other companies really fast. And Widening Kennedy was the first place that I stayed for more than a year, basically. And I stayed
Right.
for 4 years. So something was right. And then that's when I set up my own company, and it was in a recession. So, you can achieve a lot in a recession. And I just found that I was good at what I did.
Mm.
Brands and agencies were coming to me because I had a good reputation working with a great organization. And then that's where you start building, you
Yeah.
start building your brand. And that was in 2009. So, and that's pivoted and changed over the years. I exited that company in 2023. And
Right.
I've since then, set up my own company again with two partners.
I want to get more into the new company, but before that,
Sure.
I heard you say, and this made me laugh because I can relate to it so much. So I am nowhere near where you are, but I have my own business as of the last couple of years, and boy, what a journey. But I heard you say something on another podcast that cracked me up, and you quoted Diane Keaton in a Woody Allen film where she says, "Oh my God, open the window, I feel really claustrophobic." And you
Yes.
you said that was how you felt working
It's
for people, and I just relate to this
yeah,
so much.
it's ridiculous. You can be working with a really nice person in a really nice company, but for whatever reason, I wanted to get out of there. I was like, I'm suffocating. Open a window. I'm suffocating. It really was. I think Life and Death or Love and Death. I can't remember the Woody Allen film. But yes, and my dad's, works for himself. My mum and dad were antiques dealers for years.
Mm.
My brother has his own company, very, very successful company. And so it felt quite normal to do
Yeah.
this. It didn't feel like a massive jump. Also, I never had a business plan. I just thought in my head I was freelancing, but it
Mhm.
became a company because you then have to register it, and then I had to find staff to work with, and things grow. And by the time I exited, I'd built an office in Amsterdam where I live, but we also had offices in London and Los Angeles.
Wow.
So I was traveling a lot. And I did this job on my own for 10 years, and you're wearing too many hats, I
Yeah.
found.
Yeah.
It wasn't what I wanted ultimately. And after COVID, I think I just had a huge burnout,
Right.
and I couldn't work for almost exactly a year.
Right.
And it was during that time where I just thought, I can't go back.
Right.
It's not what I want. It's not for me, as painful as that is, because it
Mm.
was my own baby setting up
Mm.
that company. It's like giving your baby away. It was the right thing to do, and I never looked back. It
Yeah.
was it was absolutely the right thing to do.
Now, I'd love to get your thoughts on what, like, I mean, you are clearly a very successful female businesswoman, and I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think is required for that. I mean, you've already said that, you obviously ended up getting out of that company, selling that company, and kind of moving on and doing something else. But obviously, you set up the Finch Factor yourself,
Yeah,
you grew it by yourself. That is freaking
it's
impressive.
really hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah. So I'm just interested to know, because I'm sure there are probably some women out there listening to this who have a bit of a dream about setting up their own business. Perhaps they want to get out of the rat race and they want to take control of their lives and do their own thing, which is essentially what happened with me. What do you think is required? I mean, I would say that so much of it is to do with where you are in your head. So much of it is to do with the way that you're thinking and your kind of mindset, as well as the actual strategy. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that?
I think that you can start small. I didn't realize I was setting up a business until I registered it. And then the business has been going for a year. So, like my move to Amsterdam, I was supposed to go for 3 months, and then, it ended up I'm now here for 25 years. So for me, it was roll with the punches a bit,
Hmm.
but follow your passion. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, then it's not going to sustain you,
Yeah.
financially or spiritually, for want of a better word. It's just not going to feed you
Yeah.
in all senses of that word.
Yeah.
I think you need tenacity. I think that you need a thick skin.
Yeah.
And I do think you need to roll with the punches and
Yeah.
be creative in whatever that means to you. To me, it means color outside the lines, think outside the box. It doesn't have to be my industry, which is the creative industry. You can be, working in finance, but have some flair. It's how do you stand out? I mean, I work in branding, I work in, positioning of people and companies. So this is always on my mind. For me, it's about thought leadership. It's how do you drive a conversation? What opinion do you have that's different from other people, or at least cuts through in some way? Because there are many, you could say to me, well, there are lots of people that do thought leadership and positioning and reputation building. Of course there are, but it doesn't mean that there's not room for you if you have a perspective or you have a certain skill set. Think laterally.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, I mean, there's always going to be people already doing the thing that you want to do, but ultimately you bring your own sort of secret sauce to it, whatever
Absolutely.
that is. And I think that certainly in my experience anyway, which is obviously a completely different level to yours,
No,
but
it's not. It's not. You're running this incredible podcast. You've written a book.
oh,
it's not. It's just different. So
yeah,
please, there's no hierarchy here
yeah,
because, and I think that's one way that women put themselves down. I don't think guys would think like this. I mean, it's a horribly sexist thing to say, but you are driving this fantastic podcast and you really have found your niche, and from that has come a book. From that will come many other things. You're
I
doing
hope so.
brilliantly. And the
Thanks,
screen
Kerrie.
the screen keeps moving because my cat is trying to get underneath the stand, so I do apologize.
No,
It will look like I'm in
on a ship.
on a ship. Yeah, so
It's
I
hilarious. We
I apologize.
no need to apologize because the listeners already know about my cat and they will have absolutely heard me talking about him. As I was saying before we hit record, like him regularly deciding to jump up on my desk and like walk across the keyboard. So no problem at all. One thing I just wanted to add about what you were saying about business is I would say that one of the things that I have found is that, and I'd love to get your take on this, is you have to be willing to just like throw shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to
Yes.
you have to
You
be willing
have to
to
be willing to
fail, don't you?
fail.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you have to, that's where you need a thick skin,
Yes.
because not everything is going to work. Not everyone is going to like you.
Oh my God, yeah.
And not everyone is going to say nice things about you. And that could be because you did that shit, and you should have done better and could have done better. And that's a mistake. Roll with it, learn from it. Or it's because people are jealous of you and so they want to put you down. Not everyone is going to like you. And there's something about bravery there, and I think which is important. And you need to be brave. You need courage in order to run your own company, because you're the top of the tree, but also you do need the courage to fail. I think that's vital. Fail forwards, learn from it, fail forwards.
I couldn't agree more. And especially what you say about courage. I think you have to have courage. You have to learn to be able to, and I talk about this a lot, get outside of your comfort zone and do things that
Yeah,
make you feel incredibly uncomfortable. You just have
yeah.
to go through it, go through that discomfort because
And
that's
I get scared today as well. I
mm,
feel discomfort, this week. For me, I think to myself that I'm always learning. You have to, otherwise you're never going to get better. And I've made mistakes in my career. That's my cat. I've made mistakes. Sorry. I've made mistakes in my career. I've had to learn from them, and sometimes very much the hard way,
mm,
but it does educate you. You are educating yourself, because I didn't go to setting up the Finch Factor school. I didn't go
yeah.
to business school. I didn't go to management school. And most people actually don't. My parents
Just
never
kind of
did.
learn on the job.
My brother never did, and he's loaded.
Well, the thing is, you just learn as you go along, don't you? You like I always talk about how clarity comes from taking action. Like you'll never get to a point where you're
Yes,
like, oh, right, I'm ready now to start this business. I know
you're
exactly
n-
what I'm doing. doesn't fucking happen like that,
It
does it?
really doesn't. And I'm so glad you said that, because as what I say is just start. You
Yeah.
just need to move, because I've seen people where they go, yeah, but the website
Oh
isn't
God.
finished yet, or I just got to get my deck finished, or I just want the logo and I'm just thinking, just send someone an email. That's all you need to do, or call
Yeah.
somebody up. Work your contacts, work your network, go to events. I'm a really big believer in the power of community and the power of live events
Hmm.
for connectivity, for business, development, for learning. Particularly I think after COVID, when we all just suddenly were thirsty for, community and
Mm.
belonging.
Mm.
I do think it's really powerful in business, and that is why part of the things I do is my side hustle is that I do a lot of presenting and emceeing of stages and conferences and festivals, and that could be from Cannes Lions in France, it could be, South by Southwest in Austin in Texas, it
Have
could
you done
be,
it there? Have you done MCing at South by
yeah,
Southwest?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Jealous. Tell us a bit about that.
I love South by Southwest. It's crazy huge, and the city is transformed and taken over. And for my industry, what I'm looking at is the thread of, because they have different lanes. It could be music, it could be film, it could be entertainment. I can't remember, digital. I can't remember what they have. Interactive. And so my thread is, I want to get further in my business. So I do a lot of meetings, but I've been on a panel and I've hosted a panel as well. And it's great. It's thrilling because it's a big fight it's a bit like if you've been to the Edinburgh Fringe, there are
Yeah.
so many things going on at the same time that you have to fight to get an audience in any shape or
Yeah.
form. So when you actually fill the room, that in itself is just a win. So it's great, and there's a lot you can learn there. There are so many opportunities for community. And so I was there this year, and I'm looking to go next year. It's every March, and Cannes Lions is every June. I'm going to be, hosting a Global Marketing Summit in Istanbul, which is another really interesting place to be. So there's lots of different opportunities, and I love doing that. And I do a lot in Amsterdam where I live,
Yeah.
either speaking or setting up events, bespoke events. It's fun. And weirdly, there's a different dynamic. There's two things for me about this. I love that. I like being the circus ringmaster. It's almost like well, it is. It's literally you're the host. You're welcoming people, you're creating a community in that moment, that hour, that day, that week. And you're inviting the audience to be a community, but also to interact. You're inviting the speakers to feel comfortable and to know that they're safe to interact with the audience. And then I do a lot of moderating of events. So I'm the red thread that joins the dots through the day. And I just think that's really powerful. We get a lot of our clients on stages such as these globally, and that's what we do. We help you find that moment, but we also help you shape your thought leadership, shape your point of view, so that you have something interesting to say. You've got a difference, you're singular about something, and it's your opportunity to share your thinking. And then, of course, when it's about growth strategy, it's about, okay, that's the starting point. What can you do with that now you've been on stage? So yeah, that's my side hustle, and that's something I really enjoy.
Absolutely incredible. I mean, you've got so much going on. And before we start to talk a little bit about your single life and that kind of side of things, tell us a little bit about Also Known As. So this is your latest company that you
Yes,
have
so
business partners with.
absolutely. So I've known Jake Nesky, who founded Hustle, which is a reps company in the States. He lives in New York. I've known him since about 2010 because we helped build the reputation for a big company called Monks, Media Monks they were back then. And Media Monks, the two founders came to me when it was one office and about 30 people and said, we want to be the biggest digital production company in the world. I laughed. And then I got to work. And then, so I'm building the reputation. I'm getting them in the media, on stages, helping them submit for awards, helping them with their interviews and so forth. And then Jake was from his business perspective, was helping them with growth strategy and was introducing them to the likes of Google and Meta and brands. And so we were two parts of the three-legged stool. So we'd known each other for years, always respected what each other did. And it's almost like two sides of a coin to help a brand grow, be elevated and grow. And it just made sense to us. I'd left the Finch Factor, and it made sense to unite those two things. And so we set up a company called, also known as, along with our third partner, Gully Flowers, who is based in San Diego. So we're East and West Coast. And he and Jake already work with each other. And so what we do is very similar to what I've always done, that we have that additional growth strategy element, which is communication strategy for brands. It's thought leadership and positioning for that brand, and helping those brand ambassadors work in service to the brand, have a point of view, sharpen that diamond, polish that diamond, get people on stages so they can be seen and heard and known for something, so that their business, themselves and their business, has cut through. And so that's, we're building reputation for the likes of, Coinbase, which is a massive crypto platform. And Rocket, which is Rocket Mortgages in the States, which, they were part of the Super Bowl advertising greats. We work with AI companies, music studios, production companies, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's fun.
Why the name Also Known As? I love it, but why?
Well, because I already had the Finch Factor, and I go under that name still when I'm working as a host or a moderator. Then I work under Kerrie at Finch Factor.
Okay.
So, and Hustle hasn't finished. Hustle is still a really successful, rep company in the States. And so we're also known as, so that's how it works.
I love the name, but I was just curious to know where it came from.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Kerrie, I would love to get into, so you are a single woman like me.
Yes.
And obviously this is what my podcast is primarily about. Although I have to say, I love having conversations about, women in business and all of the stuff that we've just been talking about, because I think it's so important, not least because I think that, you sort of touched on earlier how, women, we kind of tend to put ourselves down more. And I think it's really important for women to hear conversations like this one, where an incredibly successful female entrepreneur is like rocking it. But obviously the podcast is called Thrive Solo. So we've kind of talked about the thriving bit, but we haven't talked about the solo bit. So can you just tell me a little bit about your kind of like relationship status, how you got to where you are and how you feel about it?
That's, I knew you'd ask, but it's still a conundrum to me. So, but let's unravel it. So I knew at a really early age that I didn't want kids. I wasn't interested. And I was really grateful for that, because I've had lots of friends who've wanted kids and it affected them, when they were in a relationship or if they were single. I've known friends who are single to adopt, and that's gone well to a bigger or lesser degree. I've known friends who are gay couples and they've had surrogate children, and that happened in America, and they're Dutch. And, that comes with all sorts of issues and hoops to jump through. And I've had friends who just can't conceive, and they've tried to have babies or adopt, and they were about to adopt a child in Moscow, and then Putin changed the laws as a fuck you to the rest of the world, and they lost their boy who they'd already seen. They already had information. It was heartbreaking. And they've come back from that brilliantly. And I just remember thinking, thank God I never wanted children. And I love kids, and I've got many godchildren, and I have 4 incredible nephews and nieces who themselves have now got my brother has 3 grandchildren as well. So all of that is amazing to me and fantastic. But I don't know why, but I never wanted children. I always knew it. So I think that sets you up in a certain way through your life. And I found it really interesting. My oldest friend Elaine, when she got pregnant and she had a baby, and I went to visit the baby for the very first time, and her mum and dad were there, and I knew them really well. And her dads went, oh, and I was like, what's up? Oh, I'm sorry. Is it too late it's too late for you, isn't it? And I just thought, oh, fuck you. He's lovely, but fuck you. Because I just thought this is the standard issue. This is the standard way that people see a single woman. It's not, it's not socially acceptable. And ditto for single women. I meant childless women previously, but ditto for single women. So you'll go to a dinner party or an event, and someone will say, "So have you got partner, wife, husband, kids?" And I say, "No, no." And then there's a pause for me to explain myself.
Yeah.
And I used to go into it and go, "Oh, well, I never wanted children," and la, 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 trying to explain myself away. And nowadays I just wait, I just say, no, no, now I'm single. Yeah. And just face it out, because I just think I'm done with explaining, done with explaining. I don't think it's accepted. I really still don't think. And I have, I've got a really brilliant circle of friends who are in relationships or single, and I hadn't really considered that this sounds so naive, but only as I get older do I notice and recognize more and more that I am single, because you get to the point where I'm thinking, okay, what happens when I die? Or what happens if I get sick? Or who's going to look after me? As if your partner is, honor bound to look after you in some way. So I do notice it more that way. I've never lived with somebody. So, I've never had that sort of relationship where I've lived together with somebody. And I think that I was so driven in my business that it became an excuse to be single. And I was so driven in my business that it became my baby. And I don't know that that is healthy. I think that my new company, also known as, I don't have that same connection with.
Right.
And I think that's really healthy.
Right.
Because, my first company it was very much all about me, and I was very much the figurehead, and I was very much in charge and making mistakes as I went, all in, all shades of in, working all the time, traveling relentlessly, for business. And I don't think that was healthy, certainly not for me. And that's why I left in the end. That's why I moved on, because, as I said, I had to take a year off. I didn't know it was going to be a year. I thought it was going to be a month, and it just kept going. But I'm in a much better place now. But yes, I am single.
Would you say that you are currently single by choice or single by circumstance? I'm interested to know, because I think there are so many, like you probably won't know. Well, you may or may not know this about me, but I always used to describe myself as single by circumstance, only because when I came out of my last relationship, 7.5, coming on 8 years ago, I would obviously ended up single because that relationship ended. And I just wasn't looking. Like, I was just living my goddamn life. I've never been on the apps. I have no intention of ever going on the apps. I just wasn't searching for a boyfriend. It just wasn't on my priority list. It wasn't something, I just come out of a relationship. It just wasn't in my mind. But I would still describe myself as single by circumstance, because I didn't sit down one day and go, I am choosing to be single. That never happened.
I would say the same. I would say
Really?
that I would say that I created the circumstances, accidentally or otherwise, by which I have, I am single, and have been for, quite some time. And I used to use work as a blanket to go, well, I just don't have time. I just don't have time, which actually is just a cowardly excuse to not step out into the light and look for somebody. I have been on the apps, when they first came out, when Tinder wasn't what it is now, when you could actually flick through and come to the end of the men, because, it was very new, and you could get through 100 men and then go, oh, that's it. Okay, well, I'll try another day. Those were the days.
So now is it just endless? Does it just you keep on scrolling and it never ends?
I haven't been on it for years, I have to say, but it did turn into a booty call, bonanza. So I have no idea what it's like now. But I did try the apps because, I hadn't been dating, and I thought, I'm going to try this. And it was bonkers experience to me because it was dating by app and I'd never done it. So I tried, I think there were about 5 different apps all at the same time.
Mm.
And it was fascinating. And I met so many men and it was really an adventure. And then I just felt like I'd almost like milked it dry. I just was I'd done with it, you know. Thank you. That was an experience. I don't particularly need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
So, you know, single by choice, I think so, because I've created the circumstances by which I'm single.
That
You know,
mean you sort of can't be in a relationship kind of thing because,
well, I don't know about can't be. My friends would probably say that I don't look. I
yeah.
just don't look. And I don't put myself out there to look. But I do think that's my default position. I've always been like that. I've always been um, in that position.
Would you say in a way that, which is how I sort of describe myself, I would say that I'm subconsciously choosing to be single. It's
Yes,
not,
I
I'm
would
not
say that.
intentionally choosing. I'm not consciously going, I am choosing, but subconsciously, I think I'm
Yes, I
choosing to
would
be
say
single
the
more and more.
same. I would say that. What happens, Lucy, if and when you find someone, does this podcast end suddenly? Do the brakes go on?
Well,
At
it's
what
so,
point in the dating process do you go, oh, no, I'm no longer single?
it's so funny because a few people have asked me this and I'm not really sure what my answer is, to be honest. I mean, I would feel like if I did meet someone, I would feel like I would have to like fess up because you know, I have a membership for single women apart from anything else, and there's absolutely no way that I could continue to run a membership if I'd started sort of secretly seeing somebody on the side.
Yeah,
I just, you know, took it like that would just be completely out of
yeah,
integrity. And
yeah.
but it's funny because I think the reason I don't really have an answer for this is because I just cannot see myself meeting anyone anytime soon. And
Well,
I do say on the podcast I have said more than once, like, I'm not completely closed off to it. And if, you know, if somebody happened to come along who I did feel like, oh my God, actually, I really like you, then, you know, I've had many relationships over the years. I've had like lots of relationships from when I was 13 years old up until, you know, when I broke up with my most recent ex. So I've also said, you know, I find it difficult to believe that I will never, ever have another relationship purely because I've been in lots of relationships and, you know, whatever happens, happens. But number one, I mean, it was funny when you said that you think you're, you know, you say you don't have time for it. It's kind of like a cowardly way of sort of not kind of stepping out there. And I wonder whether that's the case with me because I say, and I really feel like I mean this when I say, there is no fucking way I have the time for a relationship. Maybe actually what is more true is that there is no fucking way that I am willing to create time for a
I, I,
relationship.
I would say exactly the same. You know,
Right.
if we met somebody tomorrow,
Yeah.
and I'm just hoping it's not the same guy, um, uh, but if we met somebody tomorrow and it was just bang, then we would make time. You
Well,
know,
absolutely. And I think this is something I say about humans in general, not just with relationships. I think that whenever anybody says, I don't have time for it, ultimately what they're saying is, I'm not prioritizing it. Like, you know, it's like, I don't have time to do that, or I don't have time to that. It's like, no, no, no. It's not that you don't have time, it's that you're
it's a
not willing.
choice. Yeah,
Exactly. Because I find, and I know this because I do this, I make time for the things that I want to do. And I
exactly.
don't make time for the things that I don't want to do. And
Yeah,
I think as
exactly.
humans, we all do that. Although, actually, maybe, I think maybe you and I, perhaps we're a bit more. I think a lot, what I'm trying to say is, I think a lot of women, myself included, I used to be an absolute people pleaser who couldn't say no to anything or anyone. Whereas now I'm just like, I will say no like that. If I don't want to do something, I just don't
And
do things that I don't want
that's
to
a
do.
great learning. You know, that's a really great learning. I'm not sure, you know, am I a people pleaser? I think I am because, you know, my default position is to host and to build community and to I love having people around for dinner. I love that, you know, sharing a meal together around a table, talking and laughing and, you know, so I want to and I'm oh come on sit down Kerrie, you know, sit down and I love the buzzing around and the, you know, I actually that's what I enjoy. I'm doing what I enjoy. I'm not doing it because I, you know, have to.
Yeah.
And so am I a people pleaser? I don't know. Yeah, maybe. But when it comes to me, I think I got into a habit of being single and now it's fine. I'm not unhappy being, I don't, absolutely do not have to have a relationship to feel happy and content. I am not lonely, I'm alone.
Hmm.
I live alone, but I'm not lonely. I like my own company. I've got really incredible friends, from all over the world. They either live in my hometown of Amsterdam, or they live elsewhere. And I'm very lucky, with that. And there came a point where your friends become your family.
Yeah.
It's your chosen family, isn't it? And that's really important to me, I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to pick up on what you said there about you're alone, but you're not lonely, because I
Mm.
think there's sometimes this idea that being alone automatically equates to being lonely, and it just doesn't.
No, it doesn't. I'm very happy to go on vacation on my own.
Right.
I'm happy to go on a road trip on my own. The things I won't necessarily do is go on hey, I'm going to go on a weekend city break. That I always want to go with someone else. But if it comes to, hey, let's hire a car and do a road trip through America, very happy to do that on my own.
Oh yeah, me too. Me too. And I've absolutely done that by myself.
Yeah.
I've talked on here about a road trip. I mean, I've done several road trips in the US, but the one that I did alone was around New England, and I just,
Oh, I'd love to go to New Zealand. I
oh
still
my
haven't
God.
been.
Oh God, it's just amazing. I'd always wanted to go in the fall, and I did, and it
Oh,
was
you did?
awesome.
Okay.
Yes, it was absolutely fantastic. So I'd highly recommend it.
Well, off podcast, I'm going to pick your brain about that one.
Yeah, please do, please do. Kerrie, going back to the single thing, like, well, we're obviously still on the single thing, but just to one particular aspect of it. Let me ask you, in your heart, because I had a conversation with somebody on the podcast not so long ago who basically she's been single for years, she's very happy alone, etc., etc. But she said, I think she almost said it. No, I don't know whether it's fair to say she almost said it by mistake, but it felt like it kind of slipped out, which was that
Hmm.
she said, ultimately, she said, if I had a choice, of course, I would, find the guy. Now, I don't feel like that. There isn't a sort of a sneaky part of me that's like, well, of course, if I had the choice, if the right guy came along, da 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 da. So my question to you is, where are you on that? Do you think that, like, if you were given the choice between, I'm going to be alone forever, I'm going to be with someone forever, or, do you have a preference, or are you kind of completely sort of neutral in that regard?
Yeah, that's such a good question.
It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think of it as an of course. I wouldn't say of course, because for me, I won't settle for
Yeah,
second,
same.
I never settle, I'm not settling for second best. And maybe I'm too picky, and maybe it's self-sabotage, or maybe it's self-protection. I don't
But maybe you
know.
just say that because this whole, like what you just said there, maybe I'm too picky, maybe it's self sabotage, or maybe some of us just really like who we are
Yeah.
single. And actually, it's not about being too picky. It's just like, well, I'm just not willing to lower my
Yeah.
stat. Do you know what I mean? I think we
Yeah,
almost say
really.
that
And you're
because
right. Yes, you're right. It
we're
could
kind of
be that.
brainwashed to think, well, it
Yes.
must be, well, I must be too picky or I must be self sabotaging. And actually, it's like, well, no, maybe I just love being single.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I would I like to meet someone? Yes, actually. Yeah, sure. But that wish hasn't inspired me to get back on the dating apps or to, ask friends, hey, do you know anyone? So in a little fantasy landscape, great. But am I actively actually doing something about it? No. What's that about?
Yeah.
By which I mean, so that I am fine on my own. I'm happy, I'm content. I'm not an unhappy human. Would I like to meet somebody? Yes, but on my terms in my
Right.
fantasy landscape. And maybe my fantasy landscape is too fantasy landscape.
Oh my God, I could talk about this all day. But we're going to move on to a more serious topic. Now, I know that you have had cancer in the past and you've also had issues with your heart. And I would love to talk a little bit about this and how it has been for you to deal with serious illness as a single woman. Can you speak to this?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was about, I forget now, but I was living in Manchester and I was about 20, and they discovered that I had a very, very rare blood condition. and it had certain side effects. So nowadays I take a lot of medication. I take a lot of three different types of insulin. I'm one of those humans who actually takes Ozempic because it's a medication. So all those people that are buying it for other
Weight loss.
reasons, yeah, please don't, because it means that every now and again I can't get it because the cupboards are bare. So please think about the people that really need the drug. I digress. So I remember being a student and not really telling many people that this was, I had this rare blood condition. I saw it as a weakness. I saw it as, I don't want this to hold me back. I was one of those people that was bouncing off walls and, with energy. And I fully indulged in what Manchester had to offer at the time. So when I started getting sick, my parents never saw me in hospital. I never wanted them to see me in hospital until actually I was in a coma. And then I didn't know that they were, there in the room because I was in a coma. But that's, a few years in advance. But I think that having an illness, needing to be hospitalized because I have pancreatitis or I have viral meningitis or I have something, meant that somehow I became very protective of myself. I didn't want to be seen as weak. Those were the days where you just trundled on and didn't want to take sick days and so forth. I wanted to be seen as strong and equal to anybody. And so a lot of times I never told my parents that I was even in hospital, for example. And I was fine with that. I was fine with that. And I remember one time I felt really sick. This is by the time I was living in Amsterdam. And I got out of hospital and I was burst into tears on the phone and my mum came to look after me, So, but they never saw me in hospital until it was the New Year's Eve of 2010. And I basically had both pneumonia and, unbeknownst to me, I had pneumonia and swine flu. And I fell into a coma for 10 days. And my parents were brought over by my friends and they thought I was going to die and all these, drama. There was, a bit of drama. Spoiler alert, I didn't die. And that, as a single person, I think what happens is I triangulated my life. So there was private, there was health, and there was work, career. And that's quite difficult to manage, that triangle. And I think that might be another reason why I wasn't pushing myself to be out there. I was incredibly self-protective.
Right.
And I think probably looking back, I didn't need to be like that, but that was my reaction to, that was a form of self-protection. I just didn't want anybody to know, or I didn't want people to make a fuss, or I didn't want people to think of me as weak,
I get that.
And then what happened was the coma first pandemic was the January of 2010. I had other things going on. Every year I'd be in hospital. 2018, that December, I had a triple heart bypass. And that was a really big deal. And that was when...
It's a huge deal.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. It's
how
a really
did that,
big deal.
sorry to interject, but can you just rewind and tell us how that came about?
So that was basically as a side effect of my condition, in that my heart was fine. It was the arteries that were getting clogged up because I had diabetes. The problem with my blood condition is that I make too much insulin. I don't absorb enough and I don't deal with blood fats well. And my arteries were getting incredibly clogged. I already had 2 stents and I went in thinking I was going for a third stent. And then the doctor came out and sat me down and said, we're not going to do the stent. You need to have a triple heart bypass. And I literally picked up my phone and went, well, I'm flying to Chicago on Tuesday, so we can't do anything, because I'm going to be away for a month. So we can't do anything then. So we need to do it. We need to do it next. And he picked up my phone and took it away from me.
I'm laughing because
bonkers,
it's
response.
But the funny thing is, I totally couldn't relate to that in a way. Obviously I can't relate to it, but I
No, but you
can
can,
I
because you're
can
like, well,
see that.
that doesn't fit into my
I can
schedule.
see how you would have done that. But anyway, I'm so sorry. Carry on.
So, the doctor looked at the nurse looks at the doctor, they all both look back at me and go, you're bonkers. So basically, I had a triple heart bypass within the next 5 weeks. So 5 weeks later, I was having a triple heart bypass.
Oh my God.
And that was the big one for me. That was the one where I'm not scared of hospitals or doctors or anything like that. I respect them enormously. I got scared of having a triple heart bypass. That was when I thought to myself, I made a will, and I wanted to make a will because I had a business and, so I made a will at that point. But my friends were incredible. My brother was incredible and came over to look after me and took me back to Kent, where I'm from. And I stayed with him and his wife, Nova. And, they were amazing to me. I'll always be grateful for that. And that's because you're single. You don't, in my fantasy landscape, I'm thinking, well, my partner would be looking after me and he'd be incredible because he'd be there. But, life isn't necessarily like that. Your partner might not be there. Your partner might be traveling, or my partner actually might not understand what and this is where I get my reality check. And I just think, well, I'm perfectly good doing this on my own. And I do think being single made me react in a certain way because I didn't have anyone to say, oh, don't be stupid. Go to the hospital now. You're sick. You're still coughing, rather than leave it and then end up in a coma. Or, you've always got a pain on your left side. Why didn't you get that checked out instead of ending up in hospital because I've got pancreatitis? So I wasn't very conscious of all of that. I literally just marched on. Cut to COVID, and then I find that I have endometrial cancer, so cancer of the endometrium, so the lining of the uterus.
So this was
And
in 2020.
so this was in 2020. So again, within 5 weeks. So it was lockdown. And, the health system here is incredible in the Netherlands. I think it's really amazing. My dad has said before, if you'd had any of these things in the UK, you'd be dead by now because the NHS is crippling, which is so, so sad. But I went to get a checkup, and 5 weeks later, I was in hospital having a full hysterectomy, which is the uterus and the ovaries. And then you go immediately into menopause, which is a blessing in itself. Praise be that we all go through the menopause, we women. It's insane that such a thing exists. It's like going through puberty, but backwards. It's painful, as anybody going through it will know.
I've already gone through it. I tell
Right,
you.
there we go. Me too. Well, me too now. But what I would say is, if you're in a similar situation to me, do it. Get your ovaries taken out because for me, you miss all the perimenopause. You go straight into menopause. So it cuts your experience down by sometimes years and years. So and then after that, I had to look after myself, and I think I didn't look after myself well enough because then I got 4 hernias across my stomach and had to go in again 6 months later. And actually, that's the one that broke me.
Really?
I think I've never cried about having to go into hospital with cancer. It was my cancer project. I had it, they dealt with it, the cure was successful, end of project. And then I found that I had to go into hospital to have these hernias repaired on my stomach lining. And I just broke down because I was just like, I can't cope. This is too much now. This is a step too far. I remember telling my brother, and he was like, oh, for fuck's sake, you can't make it up. I'm writing my manuscript, which is a memoir, which is, it's a funny take on all this, the horrors of your body and the horrors of, the world, basically. And actually, I got to the point of writing it as a memoir because I started it as a book, as a manuscript, as a novel. And then I was told, it doesn't read as believable. You've over-egged it. And I said, no, but it happened. It all happened. And they're like, no. I mean, we believe you, but no. It doesn't read as as believable. I think, that was a ramble to get to the point to say, I do think that my singledom informed the way that I protected myself, perhaps too vigilantly, when my body was not well. And I think that overprotection built a wall, behind which I wasn't available.
Thank you for sharing this. It's so interesting to hear. Let me ask you, without wishing to be, my listeners will roll my eyes when I ask this question, but I don't want to sound like I'm like, oh, well, let's just see what the positives were of you having cancer and being single and blah blah blah. But seriously, was there anything about being single that was advantageous during these illnesses? Or would you absolutely say, no, fuck that? No, not at all.
I don't want anybody around me when I come out of hospital. I just don't, because it's a really weird time. You're usually pumped with some kind of anesthetic or drug. You get very tearful. It's a weird experience. And I remember coming out of the hospital after the coma and my parents being at my apartment. I couldn't bear it because I just wanted to be on my own. When I came out of the coma, and I learned that my friends had rallied and built a squad of people that kept everybody else informed. They were looking at how do we deal with the business, if I'm going to die. I mean, they were really looking, ahead, as it were. And my friends carried my parents through that period.
Wow.
They were really, they brought them over. It was incredible. And I realized that I was loved. I mean, one thing that coming out of the coma taught me was that I was loved. My friends really came up to bat for me.
Wow.
Really came up to bat for me. And I learned that I have excellent friends and, they looked after my family and so forth. And, I learned that my brother cared about me because he came and looked after me when I had the hysterectomy, and it was all, I seem to go into hospital when it's Christmas. There's something about December,
Just to add
January.
insult to injury.
Yeah, there's something about December, January. So that's something that I would take as a positive, that my friends have always been excellent, and I know that I can trust them. I have such brilliant friends, and they came over. When I came out of hospital, two friends came out. One came from France, Peter. Elaine came over from London when my brother had to go back. And then my friend John picked me up on Christmas Day so I could spend the day with him. We ate something and then I slept on his sofa. So happy Christmas. So that's what I think I learned. I think it's incredibly difficult to say what would have been different if I'd have been in a relationship, because you just don't know. In my fantasy landscape, as I said, my partner would be amazing. And he would know how to deal with my parents, and he would know how to talk to the doctors, and he would know how to treat me at home and give me my space, whatever. But you just don't know. You just don't know. You might have a partner who's on the other side of the world. That's no help.
What would you say to those single women listening, have a fear about getting ill and being single?
Well, gosh, getting there's different levels
No
of getting
pressure.
ill. Yeah, there's different levels of getting ill. I would just talk to your friends about it. If you've got something going on already, talk to people about it. Share your story. Share with your bosses or your clients or your colleagues. Tell your story and I really didn't. And if you don't want to, okay, telling your clients might be a step too far, but talk to your family, talk to your friends and lean on them. That's what they're there for. They are your tribe. They are your community. At some point, you have to step up and look after yourself. We all die alone. We all go through that moment alone. It doesn't matter if you're in a throuple, you'll still go through that moment alone. So I think you need to take responsibility for yourself and create a safety net for yourself. And that's what I did before I went into hospital with the triple heart surgery. I worked with a couple of friends who, we created a scheme because I didn't know how well I was going to be when I came home. I lived on the fourth floor of a walk-up. So that took half an hour to get me up the stairs on the first day. But you have to lean on your friends, you just do, and your family, and share your story.
Yeah. I think one thing that certainly some single women, in fact, we've been having some conversations in Thrive Solo, which is my membership in our WhatsApp group, about number one, being an only child and how people feel about that in relation to, just the whole being single thing, how it adds like an extra layer of difficulty because you don't have siblings. And also the fact that some of us are really crap at asking for help. And I would
Oh,
count myself,
me too.
right.
Oh,
So did you
awful.
have to get over that?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Really did. I really had to get over it. People would say to me, that I can do that, or we can help you, or you don't have to do that on your own. I would take myself. I would know that I had pancreatitis and need to go to hospital. I wouldn't tell anyone. I'd get in a cab, go to hospital, having told my doctor I'm on my way, so I could bypass emergency. And and, and then I'd sort of ring the next day or send a message going, "Oh, I'm in hospital, no panic." And my friends would go, "I could have taken you. I live across the road. I could have driven you there. And for me, it was just like, oh, just get on with it,
Yeah.
get on with it. And so I became very good at packing an overnight bag, or a bag where I thought I might stay for 5 nights. Then, I was very good at it. Yeah, ask for help. There's no reason to do this on your own. Ask for help. And if you really don't have family and you really don't have friends that would come to your aid, then you're just not hanging with the right people, and you need to find some new people,
Yeah.
because that's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. How has having cancer, having your heart issues, how has all of this illness impacted the way that you see the world and you see life? Has it given you a completely different perspective on life and yourself?
So I haven't had an epiphany, if that's what you're searching for. I haven't, even after the coma, I really was like, I felt robbed because I hadn't had an epiphany. I was like, I've woken up. And no, and I didn't see the angels calling, and I didn't have an epiphany, and the world didn't look more golden.
Outrageous. It's
I was,
outrageous.
I was robbed, and so in that sense, no, I haven't felt like this new lust for life. What it did teach me, that was the hard way. I was warned by my coaches, like business coaches or whatever. You have to look after yourself, otherwise you're going to drive yourself into the ground, or you're going to burn out, or whatever. It's not like I wasn't warned. And it happened, and it happened in a really full-on ugly way. I think it was like April the 1st, I stepped away from my company, thinking I'll be away for a month or two. And actually, I just had to check out and entirely pull away. And it ended up being, as I said, about a year. And that was a hard learning. That was a hard learning. I pulled away, and I think what I was learning was that it can't go on like this. That's what I learned, was it can't go on like this. And so I had to embrace change.
Yeah.
I had to change myself. I had to learn the lesson.
Yeah. Kerrie, it has just been so fabulous to speak to. I have loved this conversation. I really
Well, thank you, Lucy.
No, you're so welcome. Now, before we wrap it up, let me just ask you one more question. Well, two more questions actually. First one is, what does it mean to you, going back to the name of this podcast, what does it mean to you to thrive solo?
I love this podcast name because I often say, when I'm writing emails, I'll say, "Hello, Lucy. I hope you're thriving." That's my sort of one of my, lines. Hope you're thriving. And,
It's a great word, isn't it?
I love that word because it's about it's not quite abundance, but it's about a burgeoning of something.
It's what we should all be aiming for, really.
Absolutely.
That's why we're here, to thrive.
Yeah, it's so different from succeed, because to
Totally.
thrive has an element of abundance about it.
Yeah.
And it has an element of success in whatever success means to you.
Totally.
For me, to thrive is very hearty.
Yeah.
It's hearty.
Yeah.
And to thrive solo is to be independent. It doesn't mean you're alone. It means that you're thriving on a solo mission. It doesn't mean that your whole life is solo. You're thriving solo, thrive solo, do it yourself or experience something for yourself. Challenge yourself to step into your own light. I mean, it sounds wanky. I can't think of another way of
No,
putting
it
it.
doesn't. It doesn't to me, but I love all that shit.
So it's to thrive. What does thrive solo mean? Yeah, it doesn't mean that you don't come back into whatever community or partnership means to you, but it does for me mean that you can thrive solo in a relationship.
Right.
And I think that is the point. That's where you want to go. If you, Lucy, find somebody, you need to talk about thriving solo within a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that is also really important. My friend Fenemique is an absolute, you know, ambassador of thriving solo within a relationship, and she's been married, I don't know, I'm going to say 30 years, with 2 kids, but she's very, very independent in that relationship. I've spent Christmas with a New Year with just her. We went to Egypt. We didn't care. So, so,
I love it.
so yeah.
Kerrie, is there anything else that you would like to say to the single women listening to this podcast before you tell us how everyone can find you, follow you, and all of the things?
All of the things. I would, as I said, I think you can thrive solo whether you're in a relationship or not. But I also think that if you're scared of being single, reach to your friends. If you're scared of something, reach to your family and your friends. Find a network, find a community for you, find a tribe. Because yes, I am like you, I'm single, I'm solo, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to flourish in a community. Community is everything. Think back to the Homo sapiens, the biggest killer wasn't, the mammoth or the saber-toothed tiger. It was being, what's the word?
Out of the tribe.
Being thrown out of the tribe. That's the biggest killer. That makes it sound like, so don't be single, but for me, it's...
Well, it doesn't, that's not what it says to me at all. To me, it says, I think the point is that being single doesn't mean that you have to be alone.
Exactly.
It's like you can be single and have, because you can be single and you can have plenty of people in your life. Like I've said before on this podcast, I don't feel like I'm lacking in any love in my life. I know I'm loved. I feel loved. I feel like, I have family. I'm lucky I have family. I have friends. I have community. So I think... Is that what you mean? It's like you can be...
Absolutely, yeah. We all need to be happy within our body. We have to be happy within our brain and our body. This is us going flying solo. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that, exactly as you've just said, that we all also need community. That doesn't mean we need a specific partnership, relationship, but it means we need community.
Yeah.
And I think you can thrive solo within your community.
Absolutely. Kerrie Finch, what a fucking joy.
No, it's joyous.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. All of the above.
How can people find you, follow you, work with you? Tell them everything they need to know.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. So it's Kerrie Finch, which is Kerrie. Well, you can see it probably on the Zoom link, Finch, or on Instagram under the Finch Factor. Or my other Instagram is Kerrie Finch Speaks, and that's when I'm on stages and hosting events and so forth.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, and do stay in touch. Sending you lots of love.
And congratulations again on getting your book out, not just in the UK, but also in the US.
Thank you.
All right, Lucy, have a great one.
You too.